I was shocked today to see the journalist and Substacker Don Lemon get arrested. Um, and I'm kind of still sort of processing that thing and trying to make sense of what's happening. And you guys are both from FIRE, the Foundation for uh, Individual Rights and Expression. I got that right?
Sure do.
Um, do you want to quickly tell us who you are and why this is an an eventful day for you?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, Chris. My name is Will Creeley. I'm FIRE's legal director, and I'm joined by my brother in arms, Aaron. That's you.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Tur, and I'm FIRE's Director of Public Advocacy. And yeah, it's we've had a busy day today, grappling with this news. It was a little surprising because I think, as many people know, there was a previous attempt to bring charges against Don Lemon over his involvement or attendance at this protest that was rejected by a magistrate judge for lack of probable cause, lack of sufficient evidence to even bring the charges. And then the government then appealed that decision to a district judge that refused to reverse it and specifically said, the government's kind of lumping together all the people that were attended this protest, including Don Lemon and at least one or two, I think, other independent journalists or people who at least claim to be journalists and engage in journalistic activity. Um, but that they were not showing kind of particularized individual evidence to show that each person charged or that they were seeking to charge had actually engaged in illegal activity. But here we are
Yeah,
today
so maybe
because
just
apparently, so you can go another route. There's two options for the
yeah.
Department of Justice for federal prosecutors. They can file a criminal complaint and seek to have it signed off by a judge, or you can go to a grand jury. And so what apparently has happened now is that they've gone that other route and were able to secure a grand jury indictment.
Which was just
So let's break this
unsealed
down a bit
moments
for.
ago. Sorry,
Oh
Chris. Go ahead.
yes, yeah. We'll get into the live reading of the unsealed grand jury indictment. Um, but maybe just for people that are kind of coming to this fresh, the story so far is there was a protest that entered a church and disrupted the services there. And Don Lemon came in with the protesters, was filming the thing, interviewed was talking to the people in the church and was generally kind of broadcasting it. Um, and there's been a bunch of sort of like rhetoric and threat from the administration, sort of like this politically motivated thing. And now there's been an arrest. So they've come in, they've arrested Don Lemon for this thing. And my first reaction seeing something like this is always, I see somebody who's doing journalism get arrested and it throws up all kinds of red lights for me. And that's automatically a thing that I have sort of like as somebody that cares about free speech, I have sort of like a knee jerk reaction to that. On the flip side, a lot of people have had the reaction that looks back at the original protest and says, hold on a minute, this protest itself is not a slam dunk free speech case for the protesters. Do you want to give us maybe just focusing on the original protest that happened here that Don Lemon was streaming? What's kind of like your take on that action and the First Amendment consequences of it?
Aaron, I'll take a first cut at this, and you want to jump in? So
Mhm.
you have the right to protest peacefully in public spaces. Think about your parks, your sidewalks, no problem there. This, and first of all, Chris, I want to say, when you hear about a journalist getting arrested, your eyebrows should go up, right? Your reaction was exactly, I think, the correct one. No matter what you think of the journalist or the things he or she may write about, when a journalist gets arrested by an arm of the state, everybody should be very concerned and want to learn more. But as you say, here things get a little bit more complicated insofar as the journalist was covering protest activity that, while it was protesting, definitely expressive, was not protected by the First Amendment insofar as they left public property, they left the sidewalks, the parks, the streets, and walked into private property, here a house of worship. So that's when things get a little different. At that point, you are trespassing if the people who own that private property ask you to leave. Now, Don Lemon and the other journalists kept the cameras rolling. As you say, they interviewed folks. But that's a distinction we've been very clear about this past week. Aaron, you want to jump in? Am I missing anything big right there?
Yeah.
No, that's right. And yeah, we published a couple of pieces. Our Fire CEO and President Greg Luciano published a piece in the Free Press. It was more broadly about everything that's going on in Minnesota. And he mentioned that you don't have a right to go on anyone's private property without their permission, right? So and even if you're commandeering, even if you're going on there and using the private property to send some kind of political message, you don't have the right to do that. Doesn't turn it into First Amendment protected activity if the owner of that private property wants you to leave.
You might think it's righteous, and folks who support you might think it's righteous, but at that point, you're engaged in civil disobedience. And if you get arrested, you're sending a message about your willingness to commit to a given cause by breaking laws or doing what you have to do to get your message heard, like unfurling a banner, in some private space. So it's something like that. It's akin to those kinds of actions.
And we have a piece on our own website too that kind of explains all this in detail as well.
Yeah.
Anyone wants to check it out?
I'll throw in a link in the chat.
Yeah, throw a link in the chat to the website. And I think it's important, those of us who support the First Amendment, defend free speech, doesn't mean that anything you do while protesting or anything you do while speaking is magically legal. And, to my eye, people who say that, hey, look, if people are practicing their free speech at a church and having a service, there's a pretty strong free speech case against a protest that goes and interrupts that thing. There's sort of like maybe I don't know if it's a heckler's veto concern.
I think that's exactly. You're exactly right. Yeah, and we've dealt with this issue. Fire's dealt with this issue since our inception in the context of college university campuses, where an unpopular or controversial speaker will come to campus to give a talk, and detractors will show up and make a lot of noise or pull the fire alarm or pull the mic. And we've always said from the beginning that that's not First Amendment protected activity, and it in fact interferes with the rights of other people to exercise their own free speech rights and to exercise their right to listen and receive information from people that they are interested in hearing from.
100%. So walk me through, because I think here that even though the instigating incident has this kind of, it's not an open and shut free speech case. And even if you're somebody who's fully against the protest, fully against the argument that Don Lemon is making, I think even if you're really against those things, there's still room to be concerned or even shocked by the arrest that happened today. Can you walk me through why, even if you acknowledge that kind of complexity of this original act of journalism or protest, that you might still be shocked or disturbed by today's events?
Yeah, I think it's because the apparent threat to press freedom and the ability of the press to do its job, which is an important job in a free society, to go out and report on, document, observe, gather news on events that are of interest to the public. And that may well include events where illegal activity is occurring, right? So even if there were protesters who entered this church who committed some sort of offense, whether it's trespassing or violated some other law, then they can be punished for that, right? But that's not necessarily the same as someone else who was on the scene, not for the purpose of causing a disruption, not for the purpose of trespassing, but merely in their capacity as a reporter, either as a professional journalist or as a citizen journalist, to document the events that were happening, to serve as the ears and eyes for the public. Now, I know there's a debate raging about whether or not that's actually what Don Lemon was doing. Was he purely acting in his journalistic role, or was he engaged in some sort of conspiracy with the protesters? Did he plan this out with them beforehand? And was he actually part of the disruption and not just a bystander who was bearing witness to the events that were unfolding? But the current publicly available evidence, Don Lemon himself was live streaming his entire appearance at this event and before the event when he was interviewing protesters. So you can go watch that video and see what he was doing. From my eye, he at least wasn't doing anything that would justify the serious felonies that he's being charged with, which we can get into a discussion about, but that, really have to do with engaging in sort of violent, intimidating, or threatening behavior to interfere with others' exercise of their rights. It looks to me like he mostly was acting as a reporter. He was interviewing people. He was offering a running commentary of the event with his microphone in hand and his producer filming him, as it was happening. Um, so if that's the case, and the government's still going forward with these serious charges, I think that that's very concerning for press freedom in this country.
Yeah, I mean, if we had a case where the allegation was, "Hey, while you were doing this journalistic act, you were trespassing," and that's, even though it's journalism, you can't necessarily do that. I mean, I think people could argue about that. People could disagree about that. To my eye, that's sort of fair enough. But that's not what we're seeing here today. The thing that's I mean, I know you guys have had literally this thing dropped sort of 3 minutes before we started talking, but what is the charge and the allegation that is in this indictment? Do we know enough to say yet?
Yeah, so at least according to the reporting I saw, that the charges, there's two charges. One is a violation of what's called the FACE Act. This is a law that is intended to ensure people's safe access to both abortion clinics and also houses of worship. Applicable here would be the provision that ensures safe access to houses of worship. So it prohibits actions that threaten, um, intimidate, or physically obstruct people's access to, a church, a synagogue, a mosque, any type of a house of religious worship. Um, it also prohibits causing damage to those properties. So that's one of the charges. The other one is it was 18 USC 241, and that is conspiracy to deprive people of their constitutional rights. And it's more broadly prohibits acts that the actual language of the statute is acts that injure, oppress, intimidate people in the exercise of a right guaranteed by the United States Constitution or other law. So those are the two statutes that he's being charged with, although I haven't seen the actual details of the indictment and the evidence that they're citing and how they believe that his conduct violated those statutes.
And I know it's probably too early to say, but do you have just like, what's your quick sniff test? What's your reaction to seeing this? Does this seem like kind of a credible, fair application? I mean, I know it's probably too early to have any kind of
Yeah.
a coherent opinion on it, but tell me what your quick gut is.
I'm extremely skeptical that these charges will hold up just based on what I know now. So, first of all, if you watch the live stream of Don Lemon when he was inside the church during the protest, I didn't see anything that would rise to the level of threatening people, intimidating them, obstructing their access into or around the church. Um, so And I think that's what you need for the charges to hold up under either of these statutes. There's also the fact that although he has now been indicted by a grand jury, and there's a cliche line about how the federal government could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. I'll just put that out there and note that before they obtained this indictment, as I was mentioning in the beginning of our call, um, the government first filed a criminal complaint and tried to get it approved by a federal judge, and two federal judges rebuffed that based on their finding that there was not probable cause to bring these charges. So, I mean, I think that's indicative of something. And I'll also just mention that the district judge he's not a Biden appointee, or he's actually a George W. Bush appointee who clerked for Justice Scalia. So I think any suggestion that he's, just it's his liberal bias getting in the way here, I think that would probably be unfounded. So that's kind of where we are now. Now I will mention that there was a point in the video where Don Lemon is interviewing the pastor, and the pastor is speaking to him willingly for a bit, but then at one point says, I would like you to leave. And I don't think Lemon leaves immediately. So there's a question there of whether, okay, could he maybe be charged with trespassing? But that would be, like if you're asked to leave private property and then you refuse to. But even if that's the case, that would be a much lower level, state level or charge. And I don't think it would warrant the types of serious felonies that the federal government is charging him with. But that is just an important thing to note because, like I was saying before, you don't have a right to trespass on private property.
Yeah, this is the part that really.
Yeah. Whoa, sorry, real quick. His initial entry into that, I mean, I think the church is, like many places, is generally open to the public. So the initial entry wouldn't be trespassing itself.
Right. But having entered the church, having been asked to leave, you should leave. And
But
it's not a free speech.
If there's a clear
You don't
directive
have a free
to
speech
leave,
right to stay there.
exactly. If there's a clear directive to leave and you don't leave, then you are trespassing at that point.
Yeah. But this is the part that I get hung up on. Okay. There's a argument it's trespassing. There's a process for dealing with that. We went through that process. We had judges judges looking at it, and not just, as you say, not just, partisan judges from one side. That kind of goes nowhere. And now there's this really vigorous effort to bring these sort of very strong charges in laws that were designed to kind of protect people from blockading you out of a church or blockading away your access to abortion or these things. It's so easy to me to read that as retribution, as a deliberate kind of almost theatrical attack on a journalist, not because of the underlying, free speech trespassing argument, but as kind of an attempt to find some justification to bring really weighty charges. And that's the part that it's just sitting poorly with me. And I'm biased because I'm a free speech guy. This guy's on Substack. But like, yeah, as sort of free speech people, how should we think about that? Is there a case to be made that, look, if you're bringing these kind of really powerful but not that well supported charges in a way that the kind of political theater of it looks vindictive, like, how do we think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reasonable argument to be made, as Will, who's now participating in the live chat, just pointed out.
Did we lose Will? Should I bring him back, or is he only a chat guy now?
I'm not sure what happened, but yeah, I mean, you can try.
I'll re-invite him. You're welcome. You're welcome back, Will. But there's no pressure if you.
But he said
prefer to hang out with the.
Yeah. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Hey, he's back.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry
Aaron,
about
thank you
that.
for holding down the fort so ably. Yeah, go ahead. Don't let me interrupt you.
No problem. Well, I was just gonna to note that you mentioned in the chat that the chill is the point, and I think that's what this looks like to me. When you even if you assume that, okay, he committed some kind of low level offense like trespassing that would have justified maybe like a state prosecutor in their discretion deciding to bring those charges if they really thought that was worth it. That doesn't translate to, okay, now the federal government can also blatantly overcharge him with these serious felonies that don't actually apply to any of the conduct that he was engaged in.
Yeah, and just to underscore that, Aaron, if I may, sorry, I've been itchy watching you on the sidelines. I want to get in on it.
Please go.
You've also got the fact the White House is, I think a fair verb, it would be gloating about the arrest. They're sending out political points this morning, something like "when life hands you lemons," and then 2 chain emojis. I don't care what party you belong to or what your politics are. When you're gloating about the arrest of a journalist on, as Aaron says, charges that are not typically, if ever, applicable to news gathering, you should ask yourself what the hell is going on. I mean, again, as I say, the chill is the point here. It's designed to send a message to others who may be reporting on criticism of the White House they should think twice about it.
And I think that's right. And I think you also can't view this situation in isolation with the other ways that the administration has um, sort of shown hostility and retaliated against uh, news media that it doesn't like over the past year, right? Whether it's the FCC um, investigating or threatening the licenses of stations that are critical of the president or because they offer unfavorable coverage of the administration, whether it's revoking the AP's access to the White House because they refuse to go along with the administration's preferred term for a body of water, um, whether it's the recent restrictions on the access to the Pentagon, right, and forcing journalists there to agree to certain things um, in order to be able to report on the government that interfere with their journalistic freedom. It's really a pattern, right? So I think you have to take that all into account when you consider what the government's doing here. And I'll also just mention that going back to the point of the judges not signing off on the criminal complaint because there's not probable cause, the whole reason you have that initial process in the judicial system is so that you can screen out attempts by prosecutors to bring charges that are based on thin evidence or that are based on improper retaliatory motives.
That's right.
Thank you. This is really helping me kind of see and understand the landscape here. I hope we've made a case that to the people watching that feel as I do, that even if you're somebody that's sympathetic to the church, that's hostile to the protesters, hostile to Don Lemon, doesn't mean you should necessarily support this arrest and support, frankly, the conduct and the rhetoric of the government around it. I really appreciate the work you guys do at Fire. You guys are kind of an inspiration to me and to us at Substack. If people are looking to hear more about this, to follow along, where should they find you?
Well, just before we hopped on here, Chris, Aaron was finishing up his analysis, which is, I think, damn near ready to hit publish on. Aaron, once we get out of here, you and I will double check that indictment. As I say, it was released just about 3 minutes before we hopped on with you. And while I was kicked off due to my technological incompetence, I did scan it. It is weak. I think I said as much in the comments. The obstruction charge seems to be based on Lemon asking people questions as they were leaving. Pretty thin gruel. And the coordinating charge seems to be based on a conversation he had with people as he was walking to follow them into the church. So, again, whatever you think of Lemon, the protest, the message, anytime a journalist is indicted and you have the executive branch bragging about it on social media, you need to stop and ask some serious questions about what's going on.
100%.
Yeah, the website is fire.org, FIRE.org. Should be up, what is it, 3:31? I don't know, Aaron, we got 90 minutes till COB on the East Coast. We can make that happen.
We'll make it happen.
Sweet. Do you have time for one unrelated question? It's fine if you don't. But have you guys been following this TikTok stuff? This is the other thing that's on my mind.
Don't get me started. Yeah.
The new America, so that we force the sale of TikTok to prevent authoritarian Chinese control of it. The new American CEO comes out and says, if you're using the word Zionist to support Zionism, that's allowed. If you're using it against Zionism, that's hate speech. Yeah. And we're going to have a platform that, there's no end of policing hate speech against our political opponents. Are you as flabbergasted about this as I am?
Yeah, the whole process has been a mess. I'll take a first chop at Aaron and then jump in. We'll tag team this one. First of all, we at Fire were cognizant of, potential security concerns given some CCP ownership or control. But you had 100%. Congress by a bipartisan vote voting to ban an entire communications platform that 100 million Americans use. That's, again, something that should raise a very, very, very serious red flag, no pun intended, right? Like, that's a problem. Signed into law by President Biden, challenged, goes up to the Supreme Court on an expedited basis because of security concerns. The court, we briefed it. We were participants as friends of the court, and we said, wait a second. the government has to prove these security concerns. You can't just do it on the government say so. And second of all, think about the precedent you're setting here. When the government says national security, all of a sudden you can just take off this widely used communications platform. And in the legislative record, you had people, to your point, Chris, about the type of speech that's getting bad now. You had lawmakers on the floor of Congress saying, we're worried about our kids getting brainwashed by pro-Palestinian voices, and so you already had concerns about the type of speech, not just the surveillance of speech, but the type of speech. So that should raise all kinds of issues. Then, to continue the shameful story, you get the law upheld by the Supreme Court with 2 weeks to consider it. TikTok said, at least wait until TikTok's lawyer said, at least, consider it in a full term. Let's do a real oral argument on it. No, this court decided on an expedited basis. As Justice Gorsuch said, I wish we'd had more than a fortnight to consider this incredibly serious question. But the law is upheld, wrongly, I think, wrongly, Fire thinks. And then you get Trump coming into office. And Trump says, well, I know the law says it's got to go offline, but I'm going to ignore the law and issue a 35-day extension and then another one. And then here we are a year later. So you've got a bad law rushed into law under concerns about viewpoints and content on a private social media platform, signed off on an expedited basis by the Supreme Court, ignored by the executive branch, which is supposed to enforce it. Nothing in the law that says they can do that. And now, to get to the shameful conclusion, maybe, of the story, you've got concerns about what's happening on the app and what voices are getting censored. Now, TikTok said this week that it was because of data outages, and they're still figuring out, the nooks and crannies, I guess, getting their wires crossed. You folks at Substack would know more about it.
I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on that. You can have a glitch. That's fine.
That's right.
But it wasn't a glitch when the CEO said that in an interview.
That's right. So we'll see what happens. That's exactly right. The last point, though, here, just to note that free speech is not the province of one party or the other. No party, no politician, no one's great on free speech all the time. That's why we do the work we do and why we're proud to be nonpartisan. You had the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, say, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I want to find out about this censorship. I want to ask some questions about TikTok. Look, even under the new ownership, TikTok is still a private business engaged in speech, facilitating speech. The government doesn't get to open up the hood of TikTok and say, let's have a look at that algorithm. That's private. That is protected speech. That's making decisions about what content gets featured and what content doesn't. If you don't like what's happening on TikTok now, find another app, right? That's the way to do it. The government doesn't get to come in and start poking around and saying, actually, you need to allow Zionist speech or non-Zionist speech. So again, you've got a bunch of situations where whatever you thought about TikTok, the cure is worse than the disease, and the First Amendment is left in shambles on the side of the road.
Yeah, it's almost like a lot of thought went into that First Amendment, and we should try to stick to it.
Quote you on that one, Chris. I like that.
All right. Thanks, you guys. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time on a busy day, and I look forward to reading your take on what's in this indictment.
Thanks so much for having us. Thank you, Aaron, for holding it down for me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate you.